I think it's really important for Australians to really break down and understand the four levels of racism when we talk of racism, because I think in Australia we do a really fantastic job of understanding interpersonal racism. And for a lot of people, that's all they think there is. So interpersonal racism is what your last speaker was talking of, to your face. Your bias will come in, your stereotypes about whatever culture will come forward, or sexuality or religion. And that will come in, and it'll be an interaction that will happen face to face. And then, so that's your interpersonal. And then we have your internalized racism, which I think Australia does a really terrible job at understanding. And that is where your stereotypes and your bias about a certain culture, religion, or sexuality, they impact how you present. So you present as being better than, and without even realizing, making yourself a bit superior. It's in the way that you work, it's in the way you play, you think, and it happens as a subconscious kind of way. And if we don't challenge those subconscious stereotypes within our head, that interpersonal interpersonal racism, it stays really strong within ourselves. So I challenge people to, if you have a thought about something that floats through your head, ask yourself, where did that come from? Was it from media? Was it from an auntie, uncle that I sat with and listened to as a child, just say it over and over again? How have they impacted me as a person? And how has that impacted the way I then interact with others? And so that is something I think as Australians, we need to work really, really hard on, challenging our own thoughts we have within our own head for that internalized racism that is a very silent one, where people can say confidently, but I'm not racist, because they don't do that interpersonal kind of racism, face-to-face kind of stuff. So they're like, well, I'm not racist. But it's that internalized that does all of the damage on many cultures here in Australia, for sure, especially when I'm here, obviously advocating for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, but at the same time, I advocate for all peoples of all nationalities, sexualities, and religions, because I feel that it is very closely linked. Then we have our structural racism, and that is what our society is based on. So Australia is basically built on systemic racism, all from the very, very first moments of colonisation. And a really fantastic video or series for you to watch would be The Australian Wars. And it's a Rachel Perkins series, and it is on SBS Demand, and it was just done. I managed to write the teacher resource for it. So I was very blessed to be able to make sure that goes into schools. So if you have children, your children's teachers know about this resource on SBS Learn. But what that does is it's how we have built the structure and the systems of Australia. So from a very early age of colonisation, we had the Australian Wars, where martial law was declared on Australia, and that was simply so they could shoot and kill Aboriginal people on sight for, it was about 100 plus years, at 150 years here in Australia. You could shoot an Aboriginal person on sight for purely being Aboriginal because you wanted the farming land, or you wanted to take over that land. So that then enabled Australia to have that structure of farmland being built from racism, and all of ours. Why are there not so many Aboriginal people on boards? Why do we not have principals that are Aboriginal? We're oppressed through the system that Australia is built on. So then we have our institutionalized racism, making sure that we lift white people. They are given opportunity over other nationalities. Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander comes to mind in my voice in my head in this country. But so that institutionalized racism is like your policies. How are you actually lifting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of colour, to make sure that they are of equal to the white people that are at your workplace? What does your policies look like? What do your hiring practices look like? All of those sorts of things. Are you actually looking at them, analysing them, bringing in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of colour, and saying, have a look at what we've got at our workplace. What can we do here? How can we make this better? and putting plans in place to make those changes. But they are the 4 levels of racism. Your interpersonal, which Australia understands very well. Your where people then say, I'm not racist because of things that are happening, and to lift white people over people of colour. And then you have your institutionalised, your systemic, and of course your internalized racism, getting them all right there. But they're really, really important to understand, I think. And once you understand those, you can break them down in your workplace. You can make sure that you are actually doing something proactive about your workplace, not consistent, like keeping those alive and fresh within Australian society and making a real difference in those things. So I think that's really important. They were the 4 things that I wanted to talk about. I am unfortunately down for time, but I would love to go through the questions. I do have another 10. So if you wanted to do your questions, or people had questions for me before you go back to your other speaker, I'm more than happy to do that.
Thanks so much, Shelley. That's really generous of you. We might open out to more questions in a moment for all our panelists, but I've got one more for you, Shelley, just if it's possible. I heard the term decolonizing the workplace recently, and I love it, but I don't quite know what it means. And I was wondering whether you could offer some thoughts about what it might mean to decolonize a workplace.
Yeah, well, I'm decolonizing my own mind as well. You know, as an Aboriginal woman, I still find myself saying things like, I'm leaving here now to go to work at a school where I'm helping them embed Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history and culture into their classroom. And even the words that I say, I'm finding every time I do it, I'm like, why do I say that? Like when I talk about the history of this country, I still say things, well, up until this moment, like I was saying, you know, that people colonized, like settlers, using the word settlers. I haven't said that for a long time, but I was really comfortable with using the word settlers. And then it was like, why do you use the word settlers when they're colonizers? They came to Australia to colonize Australia and take over Australia. Australia was already settled. So that kind of language, you know, language really, really matters. So making sure that the language that you're using in your workplace reinforces that, you know, that we work a colonized country, that there are truths that we need to face, and not hiding behind those truths. But when I go to this will be the first time that I don't say, you know, Captain Cook and his merry men arrived here and just saw that there weren't fences and, you know, letterboxes and all of those things, and then said, I'm going to take over, because, you know, they were actually told to come to Australia and make peace with the native people that lived here, the First Nations peoples. So for the first time, I'm going to take that out of my equation, because it was something I saw on Indigenous X, which is a fantastic Twitter account to follow, which challenges your colonized mind. So it challenged me when I'm like, but I've been saying that because a part of me had that comfort in that colonization of saying, but they didn't realize. Well, they knew exactly what they were doing. And I know they knew exactly what they were doing because they had success in colonizing many other countries. So they knew they were coming here to do just that, to destroy the country, to destroy the people's connection to country. They very much understood our connection to country, community, and culture. And they knew that if they took that away from us, that they would be able to colonize well. So we've got to look at our language, make sure that we aren't using colonized language when we talk and share stories and truth-telling. And what are we doing to break down that institutionalized and systemic racism within our workplace to ensure that we lift everybody, that everybody has that same opportunity, create opportunity. So my father was a CEO of a company. He hired an Aboriginal woman who could not read and write, and he taught her how to read and write, because he knew that nobody was going to hire an Aboriginal woman with 3 children who couldn't read or write. So even though you're a CEO and we all say you've got to have this course and that course, who says that you've got to have this course and that course? That's part of, you know, colonization. Fire people because they're going to be good for your workplace. You know, do you have an existing relationship, or are you just going to give someone a go because it's the right thing to do? You know, like my dad, now she works and supports her family beautifully because he just gave her an opportunity that wouldn't have been there if he had followed the structure of colonisation.
Thanks so much, Shelly. Really wonderful to hear you speak.
Sorry, it's fast.
Yeah, well, the apology should go to the interpreters.
I just was going to say, I'm very sorry to the interpreter. I watched your fingers and they're moving beautifully, so thank you.